Hey, I've got the juice now. Feels a lot better being tied to that microphone. So, erasing the other. This healing series that we've been going through over the course of the last several weeks is one that is oriented to the healing not just of our relationships within our families, extended families, within our community, but also the nation. And as get oriented here. Come on, David, get oriented. Wetting the whistle. All right. So this divisiveness that we've seen in our communities, in our extended families, it did not arise 2 years ago. It was exacerbated over the course of the last 2 years. Permission has been given to let it all hang out, as it were. And we could look at that and we could say, well, you know, that's really a downturn. That's really a degradation of our society. And A Course in Miracles actually looks at it a different way, and that is the darkness, which is already there, is being brought into the light for healing. And so bringing this into the light, you know, there may be at some point in time where we look back on this time and we say, thank God for that. Right now it's kind of hard to do that, but nonetheless, at some point in time, we will realize that the darkness that has been glossed over is being brought to the light. Now, this divisiveness in our country did not originate in the recent times. It actually has been here since the founding of our country. In fact, divisiveness in and of itself is something that the human condition has always dealt with in one way or another. In some ways, it's been dealt with by ignoring it. In other ways, through negotiation between the divided parties. And in other ways, through warring and the killing of the other. Well, when I speak of erasing the other in the title of this talk today, I'm not talking about the way the old gangster movies used to refer to rubbing them out, but rather to eliminate that sense of the other, to eliminate that sense that there is an other, that there is, in fact, no other, but there is just multiple expressions of the one. And in the multiple expressions of the one, we are able to, in realizing that we all are multiple expressions of the one, we are then enabled to see how we each are the blossom of God, that we are arising from that same sprout, that same system that is God. So, as I've pointed out in prior talks, the 11 nations that exist within our country are the source of these various core values. And these core values are the basis of the division of the differences in the worldviews of these groups of people. Now, with all of the intermingling that has occurred, you know, the corporations have hire one person in Atlanta and transfer them to Seattle. Yes, there's a lot of mobility in here. And this is only a general description of the divisions. And as we see, how many of you have been hired, and how many of you have moved from one part of the country to a very different part of the country? How many of you have crossed these boundaries from, say, the deep south to the far west, or Yankeedom to the far west? Right? Many of us have. I mean, I was in the Midlands before I went to the far west. And so we have this sense when we move into a new locale that, oh, this is the way it's done here, right? We have a different way of doing it here in Colorado than we had in Massachusetts, or we had in Florida, or we had in Southern California. There's a different way of doing it. Well, that's a reflection. Those different ways of doing it are reflections of the core values. And it's not as if we move to a new area and all of a sudden our core values changed, but rather we move to a new area and the substrate of values that are held in that area begin to reveal themselves to us. And we will either adopt or not those values, but it is that substrate of core values that we see in, well, that's the way it's done here, right? So we may, in fact, shift our core values or adopt a new way of being, but that still does not mean that the core values are being changed. It's just that we are either adapting or we are accommodating those differences in the way things are done. But these core values that are held by Yankeedom, by the Deep South, by the Midlands, and so on, these core values are the basis of the differences that we have. Not all of the differences, but a good number of the differences that we hold. So as we move through this experience of healing, recognizing that there are different worldviews and recognizing that those worldviews are valid worldviews, not necessarily worldviews that we accept, but valid worldviews, then we can say, okay, that's a valid worldview. I'm not going to dispute the worldview, and I'm not going to try to change someone who holds that worldview, but rather I'm going to look at how our commonality is the greater part of our relationship rather than the differences. The ego is very adept at taking the differences and using those differences to prove that we are separate and apart. And once we have proved that we are separate and apart from someone else, now we can be in the mode of proving that our way is better, or that our perspective is better, our worldview is more complete, or our worldview has greater value to the greater society. Well, that's where, in fact, the divisiveness comes. It comes out of the ego's attempt to prove that we are separate. And it uses those differences in that proof. And that's a proof in quotes. So it's not about eliminating the other. It's not about causing others to disappear, but rather it's causing in our own mind this concept of other to dissolve. There are a number of ways to do that. Last week I used the prayer of St. Francis as adapted by Ignatius Warren. This was his adaptation, these two words. But I used the prayer of St. Francis in the meditation. And this prayer of St. Francis is about the dissolution of that concept of other through this selflessness that is the key to erasing the boundaries of the other. As we look at, come back. Make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there's hatred, let me sow love. Where there's injury, pardon. Notice how these contrasting phrases point out that we are attempting to heal those differences. Where there is doubt, let me sow faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. It's about reversing our concept, not reversing the existence, but reversing our concept that we are separate and apart. And this prayer of St. Francis, actually the prayer of St. Francis was not written by Francis of Assisi, okay? It was a reflection of his teachings. And so when we talk about the prayer of St. Francis, just know that this came out of his ministry. It did not come out of his mouth. It is an encapsulation of what he taught. It was an encapsulation of what he did. How many of you have seen the movie Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon? It's a little cult film that actually was a very important part of my transition from this belligerent ego into something that was moving towards the dissolution of the other. And that movie was a depiction of St. Francis's life. I don't know how accurate it was, but it was a reflection of the teachings of the ministry of Francis of Assisi. And in that movie, there was this underlying theme that Francis gave up the glories of the material world. His father was a merchant, and so he gave up the inheritance of the business, the family business, in the service of others. And he began through the rebuilding of a little chapel that was out away from the city. And in his effort to rebuild, he began just himself. He was the one that looked at this structure that was fallen down, and he was the one that began sorting the stones to be able to put the stones back into the structure. He was the one that started this. He was the one that had the vision. And he was the one that, even with the objection of his friends, decided that this was his calling. This was, here I am, Lord. This was his response to that inward call of being of service. And he didn't know who he was going to serve. He just knew that his purpose was to rebuild this chapel at that stage of his life. And so in his selfless service, he began to attract others who were called. He had a good friend who was a party boy, as Francis was, and his good friend, who, if you will, represented the ego, his good friend tried to convince him, no, you don't want to waste your life with that. I mean, it's just an old church. Do something more constructive, right? But that other friend could be seen as the ego calling us to maintain our sense of separation, maintain our sense of uniqueness. And over the course of time, it turns out that this good friend began helping him as well, but it was not an immediate response. Well, we have the opportunity to look upon anything in this world and see something that needs to be done. Now, we can approach that in a couple of different ways. One way is, that needs to be done. Wouldn't it be great if I'm the one to make that change? Wouldn't it be wonderful if I became famous for that change that I made, right? What is that? That's the ego screaming, yeah, let's get into the spiritual thing because we can really be good at this, right? And attempting to aggrandize ourselves in the, quote, service of others. Okay, so that would be a selfish service. That would be a service that would be oriented to making us stand out. And then the other approach that we might take is, there's something that needs to be done. I have the skills that can do that, or I have the time, or I have the motivation to do that. But it's not about me. It's about that. I want to make that available to others. And it's not about me becoming famous or putting my name on that, but rather to offer what I have to that, to make that available to others, whatever that is. That might be a small church out in the wilderness. How many of you have seen the chapel at Peaceful Valley? The chapel at Peaceful Valley is located up a Jeep road, a 5-minute Jeep ride from the community down below, and it's just a few houses down below. But there is what might be considered the work of someone who was interested in selfless service. I don't know who built that. I don't know how long it's been there. I've conducted a couple of weddings in that chapel. We were out driving the time machine this last Wednesday, and we went by Peaceful Valley, and there it was, standing up in the trees, up above the community, not being a place of. It's not like the what's the chapel up the road, the Catholic retreat to the north of there. Anyway, yeah, thank you. It's not like that where it's a famous location, but I can just imagine that the person who worked on that did the work with a sense of selfless service. Is this ever going to be used? Well, maybe. I don't see a name attached to that chapel. Maybe there's one there. But the point is that we see something that needs to be done, and we offer our time, our motivation, our skills to see that it's finished. Well, this act of selfless service is one that we can all engage in at any time, whether it's through our work or through our vocation or our avocation. It's something that we may see in some community that we're a part of. Maybe we're part of an Elks Lodge, or we're part of a reading group or whatever, and we see that there's something that needs to be done. It's not about us, but it's about that. It's about making that available to others. Jesus offered us in Matthew 25, there is this parable. And the parable reads, when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate people one from the other, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep at his right hand and the goats at the left. And the king will then say to those at his right hand, come, that you that are blessed by my Father inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me, and I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me. Put this in the context. So here is an elevated one. This is not Jesus per se, but rather this is the Christ within you, okay, the Son of Man in his glory. That is the sense of separate self that has now come into the realization of his Christedness. Okay, and those gathered around him, the righteous will answer him, Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? When was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you? And the king will answer them, truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of those who are members of my family, you did it to me. This sense that we are connected, and that the one who is needing food and has received it we are so identified with that we call that me. When we are willing to dissolve this sense of separation between lowercase self and the other, and move into the glory of the realization, the identity of the uppercase self, the Christedness. Then we look out upon the community, those with whom we are associated, and we see them not as others, but we see them as alternate expressions of self. Okay? And as we are willing to and able to see them as an alternative expression of self, uppercase, then we are willing to give them food, give them clothing, give them nourishment, give them support, give them encouragement, give them opportunities to realize for themselves what we've already come to realize for ourselves. That is, that we are not separate and apart, but rather we are the expression. We are the expression of the Christ. In the Eastern tradition, Hinduism in particular, there is the text, the scripture, Bhagavad Gita. And in the Bhagavad Gita, there is the conversation between Arjuna and Krishna. Krishna is the embodiment of the one. Some people look on Hinduism and they say, oh, Hinduism is about all these different gods. Well, in fact, they even have a phrase about the 1,000 names of God. Well, that's the point. It's that these different embodiments that they speak of are really just highlighting characteristics of the one. So Hinduism is still a monotheistic religion, but when we talk about, when we're looking at the Bhagavad Gita, we're looking at Krishna and Arjuna. Arjuna is a prince of a family who is responsible for leading this part of the family into battle because his uncle and his cousins are on the other side. And it is about the battle for the succession of the kingdom. So the uncle and cousins are arrayed over here on the other side of the valley. Arjuna's forces are arrayed on this side of the valley. And the Bhagavad Gita is the recounting of the conversation between Krishna, the embodiment of the one, and Arjuna, the prince responsible for these forces over here, as they are driving through the valley where the battle will be held the following day. This is at night. The fires of the opposition are over there. The fires of the loyal forces are over here. And Krishna and Arjuna are in the chariot. In fact, Krishna is the charioteer of the prince, Arjuna. But Arjuna recognizes him as the embodiment of the one. And so he is asking the advice of Krishna. And in particular, he is looking at this. Arjuna says, "O Krishna, you have said that knowledge is greater than action. Why then do you ask me to wage this terrible war? Your advice seems inconsistent. Give me one path to follow to the supreme good." And Krishna says, "At the beginning of time, I declared two paths for the pure heart. Jnana, I don't know how to pronounce that, Jnana Yoga, the contemplative path of spiritual wisdom, and Karma Yoga, the active path of selfless service. One who shirks action does not attain freedom. No one can gain perfection by abstaining from work. You see something that needs to be done and you say, well, someone else needs to do that. That's not the point, right? That is not what you are called to do. Indeed, there is no one who rests for even an instant. All creatures are driven to action by their own nature. Those who abstain from action while allowing the mind to dwell on sensual pleasure cannot be called sincere spiritual aspirants. But they excel who control their senses through the mind, using them for selfless service. Fulfill all your duties, including waging this war. Action is better than inaction. Even to maintain your body, Arjuna, you are obliged to act. Selfish action imprisons the world. Act selflessly without any thought of personal profit. At the beginning, mankind and the obligation of selfless service were created together. Through selfless service, you will always be fruitful and find the fulfillment of your desires. This is the promise of the Creator. And a little bit further on, Krishna says, the spiritually minded who eat in the spirit of service are freed from all their sins, but the selfish who prepare food for their own satisfaction eat sin. Living creatures are nourished by food, and food is nourished by rain. Rain itself is the water of life, which comes from selfless worship and service. The underlying theme of Krishna's teaching to Arjuna is that we are called to do whatever it is that we're called to do, and we do that either through selfish service or through selfless service. And it is only through the path of selfless service that we are attaining this sense of oneness, that we dissolve the other and recognize that we are all one. Now, in our community, we have many people, as you will soon see, many people who are involved in service. And we can approach that service in a couple of ways. We can approach that service as a means of the recognition that something needs to be done, but I'm going to go ahead and do it because, well, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to gain fame for that, even if it's fame within this community. And the other approach is there's something that needs to be done, and I see that I have the skills, or I have the time, or I have the motivation to do it. And when I'm willing to do that without thought of return, when I'm willing to do that without thought of compensation, then I will have the satisfaction of being of service to others. That selfless service is a means of dissolving, and perhaps the quickest means of dissolving the sense of the other. When we engage in our work in a selfish service, we feel an obligation. When we engage in that work as a selfless worker, we feel a sense of opportunity. So obligation or opportunity? To be there because we've committed to being there, or to be there because it allows us to feel the connection. And feeling the connection, that's a pretty strong motivation once you get to that point. Feeling the connection could be considered to be selfish. But when we do not attain for the fame, when we do not attain for the glory that's involved in that work, when we are not willing to say, I did that, that was me, but rather, here we are together. We're doing this together. We are building this together, whatever this is. That selfless service is one that many of the people in our community have engaged. Now, I'd like to, Ginger, where are you? Where do I see? Oh, there you are, right there. Right in front of me, sort of. Okay. What I'd like to do is, I'm going to call upon everyone who has been in service to the community, and we'll start with various functions. But before we get to that, okay, these are all free. You're picking up okay. These have thorns in them, but I'd like to have people who are involved in sanctuary setup or tear down. And that would be for events as well as Sunday service. All of those people, please rise. Whether you come in and set up chairs or you take down chairs, whether you come in for helping with jazz at the creek or other events, please rise. Come on. I'm asking you to rise. You're going to have to do this selflessly. All right? Ken, come on. People who are involved in setup. So as we offer you these roses, I'd like you to recognize that these roses represent the blossoming as your expression. All right. Careful of those thorns. They'll slice your ear off. So thank you. And now, for those of you who are involved in the bingo team, please rise. Everybody that's involved in the bingo team, please rise. There you go. All right. And we have a number of people that are absent today. We'll just recognize them. Okay. For those of you who are involved in Youth Ed, please rise. Youth Ed people. Whoop. All right. Angel, come on. Everybody who has been involved, please. Okay. Yeah. For those of you who are involved in facilitation, and this is not just facilitation today, but facilitation over the course of time. Facilitators, writers group, facilitators. Jeff, I could call you a facilitator of sacred service. Absolutely. Other facilitators? Okay. Those of you who are involved in the elder empowerment team. Elder empowerment. In fact, you've been facilitator of the writers group for a long time, and workshops and movies, spiritual sentiment. That's all. Thank you. How about board members? Present and past board members. Present and past board members. Do we have all present and past board members? Okay. All right. Who? I'm sorry. Were you going to say something? Okay. Were you going to say something? Oh, okay. Okay. Greeters. Hospitality, greeters. Beauty team. Cleaning team. Oh, Joanne's downstairs. Joanne's downstairs? Okay. All right. Any other volunteer? You're on the elder team, the elder empowerment team. Don't ask me to remember all of everyone. You were doing greeting, right? Accounting, posting. Oh. And Jesse is in the cry room. Jesse has just taken on the posting to General Ledger, so Jesse has the has a flower coming to her. Who else has been involved? I'm sorry. Oh, the band. Well, you know these guys actually they actually get paid for what they do, but nonetheless, they do such a good job that it is only fair. Prayer chaplains. Prayer chaplains. Who are prayer chaplains? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Who? Who else? I know I'm missing something. That Monica. Yeah, Monica and Patrick. So when you look around at the community, yes, D. Well, in fact, anyone else that I'm missing? Ginger. Oh, you don't have a flower yet. And D. D, I'd like you to come up here. You're going to have to stand up and come up here. Absolutely. Come on, come on. Many of you know that Dee has been in our congregation since before the congregation formed. Back in 1999, as I was proposing pioneering a ministry to the Association of Unity Churches board, Dee was attending the Association of Research Enlightenment back at Unity Village, and she had heard from a friend of hers that I was thinking about pioneering here in Northwest Denver. So she was back there at Unity Village, and so she looked me up. She said, hey, David, I hear you're coming to Denver. I'd like to know what your plans are. I'd like to be involved. And so Dee is really our longest term, I can't say oldest congregant, but longest term congregant. And she has been involved in providing coffee for us every week. I think you have been present more often than I have, actually, in this ministry. So, and she just recently retired her duties as the coffee preparer. So we had this little plaque made up for her. Now I know that you may not have room in your another giga. Come on, David, please. But what this says is our logo on top, D. Johnson name on it. Our longest serving congregant. Thank you for your many years of dedicated service, 1999 to 2017. That's a total of 19 years. Wow. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we also have a cake that Dee's going to have to share with us. That's just the way it is. So this activity of selfless service is an important part of our spiritual journey. It allows us to dissolve this sense of the other. And in this, we all are blessed. We'll have our meditation. As we come into our meditation, let us come in with, I cast all my cares. Into this time of reflection, of celebration, as we allow ourselves to envision that we are an expression of God in this moment, that we are here called to serve. As we acknowledge this call to service, let us also acknowledge that we're here to serve not for our own fame, but we're here to serve, to be nourishment for others, to help others lift and transform, to allow others to be the best that they can be. Feel that sense of dedication. Feel that sense of selflessness. Here I am, Lord. Let me be the expression of your love. Let me be the expression of your desire that each and every one of us be lifted. Make me the instrument of thy peace, to sow love, hope, light, joy. Let me be here to understand. Let me be here to love. Breathing into this sense of selflessness. Breathing into this sense of being available for others. We give thanks. And so it is that we come back into this time and space, sharing the words of the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come,